Mina Kimes, ESPN senior writer. She's also got an ESPN daily podcast. You can see her on Around the Horn, First Take. You can basically find her everywhere on the mothership. Mina, thank you for joining us. Under different circumstances, we'd be talking about this Super Bowl, but given your age, you're there with Kobe, growing up with Kobe. This is after the Jordan era. I know what Jordan meant to me growing up and other players, but what did Kobe mean to you?
I think, so I grew up in Seattle, and for me, and I think a lot of people my age, Ken Griffey Jr. was iconic in the sense that everyone I knew wanted to be him, basically. We all swung like him. We tried to act like him. We wore, cap backwards like him. And I think Kobe kind of occupied a similar place in the sports imagination for people of my generation, where everyone I knew just kind of wanted to play like him and act like him and be like him. I like more than Jordan for kids my age.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering about, because, it was Be Like Mike, and then Ken Griffey Jr. came in, and, he had his presidential campaign.
Yeah.
Like, they become a lot larger than life. And then when they lose their life, and then you try to put it in perspective. And that's the hard part with a day like today. Like, how do you pay tribute in a way? Because I said you can mourn, but you celebrate. But how do you judge, how do you juggle that fine line?
So for me, yesterday, flying into Miami, landing on a plane from Los Angeles, everyone getting the news at the same time and sort of reacting with shock, that hit me really hard. But I think what sort of, I don't want to say broke me because that feels a little overly dramatic, but really stung me was seeing how old his daughter was, seeing 2006 through 2020. Like, those are not numbers you should ever see together in that context, right? You saw the Kobe, his year in memoriam, RIP, but when I saw it applied to his 13-year-old daughter, it just kind of shook me to my core and really made me think about, in the way that death often does, it kind of makes you think about your own life and your relationships and how, it feels solipsistic, but how do I relate to this person? How does this person's life and death affect me? I think seeing that really made me reflect on my own relationship with my father. I'm a sports writer because of my dad, like a lot of women who work in sports. Because we had a similar relationship where he pushed me and sort of, transferred his passions to me, which was football in my case. And I think yesterday, seeing all of the remembrance about particularly their relationship caused me to reflect on that, to reach out to my own dad and just think about where we came from as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I immediately thought of my three daughters. They're now they're in their 20s. They're now asking me about sports, because growing up they never did. Really? But now they want to know about sports. And I go, my one daughter is like, now tell me everything I need to know about the Super Bowl, Dad. I go, no, hon. You got to do a little bit of homework first, and then come back and talk.
You didn't just jump right in.
I tried to, and then she goes, so Patrick Mahomes is good, right? And I go,
yes.
Okay, yep. We got a starting point here. But that relationship, though, with your father is powerful, and it still goes on, and that's why when you see a 13-year-old and what she was to him, like she was an extension of him. And he I think fell in love with basketball again because of her, and to go to those Laker games because she wanted to go.
I think he had a sense too that she would not only carry on his legacy but sort of exceed it in some ways. No, maybe not as a player or maybe as a player, but also as someone who could be really important to the women's game. And again, not to bring it back to my own experience, but growing up, I remember my dad explaining to me very basic football terms to get me into it, his sort of distorted view of the game, which was that running backs were everything, and, old school football and all the kind of dad stuff you learn. And now he has to ask me constantly for questions about things that are happening in football and changes in the game, and it's a lot of fun.
You're far more knowledgeable than your dad now.
Yeah.
How would you describe your fandom, though? Because when you're on with Dan Le Batard or Around the Horn, it feels like if they can bring back a clip of you as a Seattle fan, they are quick to do that, to embarrass you.
Yeah, right. I know they like to surprise me with the interception, which I'm basically numb to at this point. Like, it just washes right over me, But
we had Russell Wilson's mental coach on last week.
Oh, yeah. Trevor.
Yeah, Trevor Moawad. And he said that he said at the time of that interception, 124 million people were watching it. And so his job after that was to get together with Russell and get every comeback that Russell ever had from high school, college, and the NFL. And they watched it over and over and over. Do you need Trevor to help you get over Russell Wilson?
We all need that in our lives, right? For like your low moments, someone to immediately play the highlights of your life for you, right?
Yeah.
Or to like Google yourself and see the nice things people have said about you or something like that, perhaps.
Do you do that?
No.
Of course not.
Who would ever do that?
But if you're doing Around the Horn or one of those shows, do you look at Twitter and what they say?
Well, fortunately, it's pre-taped. Oh, like even when it's actually on. I made the mistake once of looking at my mentions during First Take, which is live. And I've said this before, I wasn't debating Stephen A., thank goodness, in this case, because I checked my mentions, and of course, there was some, First Take in particular, it brings out a certain sort of audience. And so when it came back from break, because I, again, had foolishly, this was like early in ESPN, one of my eyelashes looked like a caterpillar, like crawling, because the tears had loosened it from my eye, which also didn't help with the mention. So ever since that experience, I never look at what people, especially not live, because you can't do that.
No. And I always tell the Danettes, don't tell me.
You don't want to know.
No.
Yeah.
They read it. I don't want to know it. Because you can't, only if we've made a mistake do I want to know it. And if I have to clarify something. But I don't care. I don't. Because it'll affect you. You can get 9 people saying, oh, you're wonderful. That one person who says,
right, that's all you notice.
You're over the hill. What's wrong with you?
I know.
Oberman carried you all those years. Like, you just sort of go, oh, God,
I know.
That's a bummer.
This summer, I had a chance to do color commentary for the Rams preseason, which, of course, is long, live, and I was very nervous, and then I checked it, and it was a bunch of tweets, all from my mom. And then I remembered, oh, right, this is preseason football. Like, they're not, my mom is probably the main audience right now.
Yeah, they're not moving in for the kill
yes, exactly.
in preseason. How do you come up with the topic or guest for your podcast?
For The Daily Show, yeah. We're really lucky because we have so many people who work at ESPN and we can lean on them around the clock, especially when something like Kobe's death happens. We had Ramona Shelburne on today, who had a personal relationship with Kobe, wrote about a wonderful story about him in 2016 during his final season. And so we usually decide a couple days in advance. We had a whole slate of Super Bowl shows planned, but then something like Kobe happens and kind of throw it out the window and start over, which happens a lot in sports.
I am friends with Shelley Smith, and Shelley went through cancer, and she covered the Lakers for ESPN. And Kobe stopped talking to her after the trial in Colorado, said didn't like the way she was reporting on it. And she went through chemo, lost all of her hair, and then she was going to show up for media day. And people said, maybe Kobe will talk to you now. And Shelley wasn't sure. And then sure enough, Kobe came up, put his arm around her and said, hey. And she said, hey, I missed this. And you could tell where, what happened and that compassion where that is one thing, but this is somebody who's trying to live. And, I think Shelley was always appreciative of, he was competitive in how people were covering him in Colorado, but there was also compassion that was deep down. And you didn't always find that with him. And same with Michael Jordan, even Tiger. Like there's a certain mindset of be great. And then, what are the casualties with that greatness? And that's where I loved seeing him as a family person with his daughter.
I think that's the great thing about covering athletes over the course of their entire career. So many of them, we meet them when they're like teenagers, right? Yeah. I mean, I thank God every day no one knew me when I was a teenager. And so we see them go through so many different phases, some good, some bad, some really bad in their lives, but also as journalists, we try to have the capacity to mark change and observe it, and I think commemorate it when it happens.
It's great to see you. We appreciate you stopping by. Each day, Mina has a guest, and you discuss the most unique, compelling stories. It's the ESPN Daily Podcast, available for download on ESPN, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Also, on Highly Questionable, Around the Horn, First Take. What are you on today?
Just this today.
Oh, this is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I cleared out my schedule.
Oh, I love that. Tell your husband I said hello, and she survived the Levitard wedding as well. Right?
What I remember of it,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Mina Kimes from the Mothership.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune into Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV. Stream for free on BR Live or download the Dan Patrick Show app.